right. Well, that's a hard act to follow, I must say. But welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event on transferring your most valuable skills to the public service. Alors, vos compétences les plus précieuses au service de la fonction publique. So this is our fourth session at Career Bootcamp 2021. And we're very excited for today's panel. I'm very excited to not be moderating today's panel, because then I get to watch and hear from our speakers. And I'm very excited to have that opportunity. So I hope you are all excited for this as well. So I will begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am joining you from is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. I'll acknowledge as well that based on our chat, we have people joining us basically from everywhere across Canada, and that we are all on different traditional territories of different First Nations peoples. So good to take a moment to reflect on that. And Marcella, if you can be so kind as to put in the chat the sort of territory finder of where am I located and what does that? Oh, excellent. Marcella's overly quick. I didn't even describe it and she already had it in the chat. So thanks very much for that. Alors, au fur et à mesure que nous progressons dans la session d'aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos questions en utilisant le bouton questions et réponses, Q&A, button dans la langue de votre choix. Alors, vous pouvez avoir vos questions en français ou en anglais, et puis les réponses vont être dans la langue de votre choix. So today is a bilingual session, so please pose your questions in the language of your choice, either in English or in French. If you select a different language than English or French, our panelists will do their best to respond in the language of your choice, but it will be a bit more of a bit more challenging for them to do so. Alors, aujourd'hui, nous avons Jason Betts, qui va être le modérateur de cette panel de discussion. So today we have Jason Bett, who will be moderating today's panel discussion. Jason's a Director General of Communications at ISED, and he is the champion for Public Service Pride and Public Service Pride Week, representing a network of more than 50 federal departments and agencies. He works toward building a clear message that the public service is committed to cultivating a diverse, safe, respectful, healthy, and inclusive workplace. So welcome, Jason. And I'll finish my remarks by saying, please share your thoughts on today's session using the hashtag CBC_CDC on Twitter. We also have an Instagram account. You're welcome to interact with us on there. But share your thoughts, share your advice on the social media platforms using that hashtag. And please put all of your questions in the Q&A. I see that we have 800 plus people joining us right now. So please share comments in the chat, but questions only in the Q&A, and that will help us organize those and ensure that the panel can move along smoothly. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jason, and thanks very much everyone for joining us today.
Oh, you're on mute, Jason.
I promised myself that this would not happen in 2021. And it did. You know, it's the music that got me going. I was so energized and I want to keep dancing. So anyways, thanks Josh for that kind intro. Avant de débuter, je confirme que cette session est bilingue. Alors, soyez à l'aise d'utiliser la langue de votre choix pour les questions et réponses et pendant le panel aussi. Alors, bonjour et bienvenue. Welcome to everyone from across Canada joining us today for this really exciting discussion. I could already see in the chat that there's lots going on. What a pleasure it is for me to be part of Bootcamp 2021. This is my first time attending a bootcamp where I will probably not be yelled at for skipping out on my push-ups. However, if I keep muting myself, then I'll probably get yelled at. Did you ever look at a poster and ask yourself, do I have that skill? Est-ce que j'ai cette compétence? Est-ce que je peux utiliser des expériences de rôle précédents dans le secteur privé ou d'activités de bénévolat pour démontrer cette compétence? Can I draw on previous experiences from private sector roles or volunteer activities to demonstrate those skills? And why does every poster keep using different language to say the same thing? Well, you're at the right place. Let me introduce you today to our three distinguished panel members. First, we have Kim Macy's. Kim joined the public service in the early 90s and has held various positions at the Department of Canadian Heritage and the Library and Archives Canada. She is currently the Director of Consultations and Stakeholder Engagement at the Canada Revenue Agency. You may know Kim in her former role as Executive Director of the National Managers Community. Kim has extensive experience in developing partnerships and collaborating with stakeholders from both inside and outside the public service and managing multidisciplinary teams in the delivery of national and international policies, programs, and initiatives. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Jason.
Our second panel member is the Deputy Minister, Daniel Kwan Watson. The Deputy is a proud public servant who is passionate about the role that public institutions play in shaping Canada and the lives of Canadians. His appointment at Crown Indigenous Relations and Indigenous Affairs is his fifth appointment as a Deputy Minister, having been Deputy Minister and previously Associate Deputy Minister of Western Economic Diversification, Chief Human Resources Officer for the Government of Canada, and Chief Executive Officer, Parks Canada. Daniel is a pilot, sang for a time with the Regina Philharmonic Choir, has taught firearms safety and hunting courses, and has represented Canada in French, English, and Spanish. His record for riding a Harley Davidson from Ottawa to Edmonton is 46 hours and 10 minutes, one he intends never to beat or repeat. Welcome, Deputy.
Hello.
Et nous avons Lynn Larivière. Lynn a récemment assumé le rôle de gestionnaire principal, recrutement et dotation au sein du programme de travail, d'emploi et développement social Canada. Plus récemment, elle était directrice adjointe au bureau régional de Toronto de la Commission de la fonction publique dans la région de l'Ontario et des Prairies. Lynn possède plus de 20 ans d'expérience dans la fonction publique en ressources humaines, ayant travaillé dans plusieurs ministères, principalement dans les domaines de dotation, du recrutement, de la planification des RH, de la sensibilisation et de la recherche des talents. Lynn est basée à Toronto. Quand elle le peut, Lynn aime passer du temps sur les sentiers à apprendre de nouvelles compétences sur son vélo de montagne. Bienvenue, Lynn. Now let's move on to the panel discussion. Our first question for today, Deputy, what are the most valuable skills you would consider in the public service?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a great one. Obviously, there's no single one. And I think there are some, though, that are foundational across the public service. And so I'll try to hit the ones that I think would cut across the biggest number of positions. I think one of them is maybe it's a skill, maybe it's a factor, but it's knowing why you want to do the job you want to do. And you won't often find that in a poster, but trust me, as someone who's sat on 100 or several hundred hiring panels, the people who know why they want to do what they want to do always tell their story better. There's an authenticity about it. They have thought about how it is that they fit into what is happening, what is possible. They understand how they can contribute. They understand how others can contribute. And it's not a skill in its own right, but I would say that everybody that I've ever met that has had a good sense of why they want to do that particular job has almost always outperformed in the interview process those who thought it would be a good job, but really hadn't thought more deeply about why they wanted to do that. I'd say on top of that, though, the ability to work with others. We are in the people business. And I don't care if you're a scientist, I don't care if you're in medical issues, I don't care if you're negotiating, taking down blockades like I'm sometime in the business of, I don't care if you're talking about pension reform or any, we are in the people business. And all of our business is too big to ever be done by one person. And it's often too big to be done by one department. And it's regularly too big to be done by one government and one segment of the population. So if you can't work with other people and can't do it well, it's hard to succeed in this world. And I think the other thing that is true, and we've seen this an awful lot in the last year, the values and ethics that apply to us in the public sector mean that we need to do things and to be seen to be doing things in ways that are different than if we owned a hardware store, or if we were paid on a commission basis for selling soap or whatever it was. And so the ability to demonstrate those values and to demonstrate that those values are at the core of what it is that we do. You won't read these in exactly those way on a poster. And there are a bunch of things there that you will have to demonstrate: knowledge of things and understanding of how systems work, and sometimes the ability to conduct analysis or negotiations or legal research or things like that. Those are all critically important. But I would say the ability to demonstrate and live the values that are proper to the public service, and the ability to work effectively with others, tied together with a real understanding of why you want to do that particular job. I think those, if you have that as a foundational point, all of the rest gets easier, and you'll invariably tell a better story.
Now, just to follow up on that, so if I am someone that has the skills and I feel like I can sell myself and I can tell my story because I lived it and I believe it, and I truly feel that I would be a great candidate for that job, but I don't get it. I don't get that job.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do now?
One of the two things I've always used as a career planning device not to think about what I want next. I've always thought about what is the job that I want 2 years from now, or 2 jobs from now. And one of the things that somebody told me once in career planning that stuck with me and I've used all along, they said, Daniel, the question started as, what do you want in your next job? And I sort of basically done what I'd always done in my life. I picked off an organizational chart because I knew the name of that position. I knew the name of that department. Said, I would like to be the director of operations at wherever. And they said, no, what do you want in your next job? And I sort of thought, well, I think I just answered that. I think I should be director of operations here, there, or the other place. And they said, no. Imagine this: 18 months from now, we run into each other, we have lunch. You say to me, Daniel, I say to my friend, Ed, I can't believe that they are paying me good money to do this job. I love it so much, I'd do it for free if I could. He said, what would make that job, what in that job would make you say that? And it was a different way of thinking about it. And so I've always thought 2 jobs ahead, because the next job should be the job that helps prepare me for what that second job is. What I'll tell you is this: I've never once made it to that second job because something more interesting to me showed up against sort of what I originally thought I was doing. But I've also always done something that I call a summary qualification chart. And that is where I parse out what's in the statement of merit criteria. And I look at each knowledge, each experience, each factor that they're looking for, and I do a table. And I actually ask myself, do I think I've met this? And I list out where I have. And I've self-selected out of some competitions because I realized I really could not make a credible story about how I had one piece of that. But I think the other thing is, and this can be difficult. You ask the question, what do you do when you don't get the job? Number one is you swallow hard. And you go in and you ask what they have to say. And you show them that you're prepared to listen to anything they have to say. We're all human. And if it's really hard for someone to hear some news, chances are that the other person will hold back a bit of things that they might otherwise have said. Show them that you're listening. Don't start arguing. Don't start telling them what they missed. They've been doing this for a while. They've heard a bunch of people. Listen and hear what they said, even if you profoundly disagree with them. Listen to what they said, and then go back and do the hard work of saying, okay, here's what one person said. I wonder if a bunch of other people would say it. Let's think this through. And once I've thought it through, if I think there are actually gaps there, what am I going to do?
Very good advice. And it kind of gives us the opportunity to shape our story. And then when we go back, we're even stronger and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Alors, c'était ce que nous avons parlé de quand on se positionne pour un certain poste. Si c'est un poste dans lequel on croit, on peut vraiment se vendre parce que c'est des qualités de travail et l'expérience que nous avons vécue. Et quand vous avez du vécu, vous pouvez vendre votre salade aux gens. Alors, c'est très important. Mais je crois que ce que le sous-ministre a dit, c'est si la première fois ou la deuxième fois, ça n'arrive pas, on essaie toujours de penser au poste de rêve que nous aimerions avoir dans les prochaines années. Et ce qu'on fait, c'est we build our shell et on se prépare pour notre job de rêve. Alors, c'est bien. Merci.
Oui.
In the chat, I saw a little bit of, one of the skills a few skills that are not easy to have when you're applying for a supervisory role, for example, is if I don't have supervision experience and I don't have any experience on managing a budget, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Lynn, est-ce que tu aimerais adresser cette question?
Certainement, bonne question. Merci, Jason. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait, en tout cas? Je pense, dans mon expérience, qu'est-ce que je dirais? Ce serait on peut ressortir notre expérience dans divers endroits. Ça pourrait être du travail de bénévolat que vous avez déjà fait. Ce serait peut-être la gestion de projet, soit peut-être pas dans un milieu de travail. Je sais que j'ai déjà, moi aussi, comme Daniel a dit, je pense que j'ai siégé au-delà de peut-être au moins 300 entrevues depuis que j'étais à la fonction publique. Donc, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui donnent leurs exemples de leur travail co-op, leur travail qu'ils ont fait, qui ont peut-être des projets où est-ce qu'ils ont siégé ou qui ont peut-être supervisé dans leur cours à l'université. Donc, vous pouvez prendre votre expérience de divers endroits. Ça n'a pas besoin de toujours être soit à la fonction publique. On pense toujours, puisqu'on est maintenant à la fonction publique, c'est qu'est-ce que les gestionnaires se recherchent. Mais ce n'est pas toujours le cas. C'est d'aller chercher les exemples, les bons exemples qui répondent aux critères où est-ce que des postes dont vous appliquez répondent. Donc, vous pouvez chercher votre expérience à divers endroits. Je ne sais pas si ça répond.
Oui, c'est bien. No. So basically, we're talking about, for individuals who want to apply for a supervisory role, and, most of the times, some of the criteria are experiencing in supervising a team, experiencing in managing a budget. And it's difficult sometimes when we don't have that experience, or we feel that we don't meet the 2 years or whatever the criteria says. And Linda's talking about, it's your opportunity to kind of look at your background, look at all the experiences that you've had, all the multiple jobs, whether they're volunteer positions, whether they're in the private sector. Kind of think about if you were able to come up with strong examples. Again, it's important to have concrete examples. Sometimes we tend to mention it, but if we can't support it with concrete examples, then sometimes we have to go and find other ways of gaining that experience, right? So it's by looking at the poster, back to the deputy's point about being 2 steps ahead. If I want to be a supervisor, then if I'm an EX -2 or -3, and I'm ready, I'm saying, well, you know what, in a year, I think I want to be a supervisor, but I don't have managing a budget, then it's time to talk to your boss about how can I get this done? Maybe it's an assignment, maybe it's a short-term project or whatever that would be. So it's always about going back to the deputy's thought about thinking about that job that you really want in 2 years. So, okay, good, merci. Next question will be for Kim. Kim, when you're hiring, what are you looking for in terms of skills?
Well, for me, communication is really important. So as you mentioned, with the National Managers Community, for the last 3 years, I had managed a virtual team. So communication was hugely important because they were all across the country. Even when we hired folks, we did it on teleconference. So they were almost blind interviews. So when you see someone able to communicate, like not only verbally, but written, nonverbal communication skills are equally as important because especially now during COVID, those are sort of the only ways we can interact with one another. So I'd say communication is probably the most important one. I think someone needs to be polyvalent. What I mean by that is adaptable, flexible, willing to take on new or different opportunities, working with different areas, and, the continual wanting to learn, being curious, asking questions, bringing new ideas to the table. So someone who kind of might have a lot of experience with policy, maybe wants to learn a little more about programs, but someone who wants to sort of take a look at the government of Canada and all the positions they have to offer and say, okay, what do I want to try now? And, for me and my personal experience, I stayed places 2-3 years at the very most. So given that variety of experience, I was able to figure out what I was passionate about, what I could bring to the table. And some of the things that, I did it, I got that t-shirt, but I don't think I'm going to go there again. So in terms of another thing I look for is being aware of Government of Canada priorities. If someone's coming to an interview, I want them to have done some research. I want them to know a little bit about our organization. What's the mandate? What are the priorities? Did you look at the website? The reports, like maybe you could look at the mandate letter and, the clerk's annual report as well. Like for me, I want to know they have that initiative. They can connect the dots. It doesn't necessarily always have to be in your organization, but it needs to be able to make those connections in other organizations, how it can benefit yourself, your organization, and Canadians in the larger scheme. So I think those are sort of the three things: polyvalent, great communication skills, and do the homework.
Great.
Can I just add to that?
Sure can.
Pour moi, comme les deux types d'entrevues qui vont le pire de toutes les entrevues que je vois, c'est numéro un, lorsque la personne veut vraiment un emploi. Puis c'est vraiment ce que veut la personne. Donc, Kim vient de parler de est-ce que vous comprenez ce qu'on essaye de faire ici? Est-ce que vous comprenez c'est quoi l'importance de ce qu'on fait ici pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes? Parce que c'est pour ça qu'on existe. Et est-ce que vous me parlez de faire avancer dans peu importe c'est quel rôle, que ce soit comme CR3, que ce soit comme DM3, n'importe où entre ces deux postes-là, est-ce que vous comprenez ce qu'on est en train de faire? C'est quoi l'importance? Est-ce que vous montrez que vous voulez contribuer à ça? Et une des manières de tomber dans cette catégorie que je trouve ne va pas très bien, c'est lorsque on a une entrevue que moi je qualifie d'être une entrevue de troisième personne. Et ce que je veux dire, on ne parle pas de ce que tu ferais et ce que tu contribuerais en partenariat avec d'autres, en travaillant avec d'autres certainement, mais lorsqu'on parle plutôt qu'une personne ferait telle chose dans ce poste si la personne était dans le poste. So I don't really want to know in an interview what is the sort of theoretical, technical, what would any given candidate do in a particular position if that person were in that position. I know that. I hire the position. They report to me. So I don't need to be reminded of that. My question is, what's the unique contribution that you bring to that? How is it different if you're going to be in that position as opposed to the next person? And if part of that story is that you're telling me that you know what's important to us, you know that we're trying to do, and you're wanting to be a part of that, and you're showing me how in whatever way it is, from CR3 up to DM3, showing me that you know how you want to be able to contribute, that gives me a window into what it is that you want to bring to the organization. So third-party interviews, where a person explains what a given candidate might do in a position in a particular thing, don't tell me very much. And if what I'm hearing is, listen, I just want a job, that doesn't tell me as much. Like, it isn't necessarily wrong, but the person who comes in, who understands the impact, who understands what role, who can give a sense of what it is that they would bring to it, that speaks much more to me.
So if I can just build on that, in terms of, again, speaking of what I bring to your organization, sometimes we're told to speak about, make sure that you address yourself as I, and then sometimes you want to talk as we, because it's not always I, because I don't do everything. But then if we talk about we, then I didn't talk about I, and then that doesn't work. So what's your comment there in terms of how do we approach the board? How does one get ready, and do they sell themselves on I or on the we?
If I could jump in, I think there's an opportunity to do a bit of both. If it is truly what you'd have accomplished, you are a one-person team, then go crazy. However, there's nothing wrong with saying the team accomplished this, and what I contributed, as Daniel was saying, to this project, to this result, was this, and this.
That's good feedback. Kim, while I have you, so when you were talking about some of the skills, the 3 skills that you were thinking of, how does one get those skills? How do I acquire those skills? If I don't have comm skills, how do I get comm skills?
So there's a few ways. It depends if you're talking personal communications or you're talking about communications in large. There are different courses at the Canada School of Public Service. For instance, how to write with plain language. That's a huge one I'm hearing. I actually spoke to my team about it before coming on. I said, hey, what are the skills you require? And everyone said, plain language writing is super important. For me, the ability to communicate in a respectful manner. We're all not going to get along. That's a given. Finding that way, finding that path, how you could have a differing opinion, but you deliver it in a way that is productive. So there are a lot of courses, like I said, through the Canada School. There are other ways you can find resources, whether it's FIN or the National Managers Community, GC Connects. I think when you're looking at a job poster and you're sort of looking at everything, and it's a great idea to make a matrix. Make that matrix of if you don't have something, how can I get it? And the government of Canada has so many horizontal organizations, and I'll just say the functional communities for one. So there is a communications functional community for core communications professionals that offer courses, and you become enriched with your peers, and you can learn from them and learn different skill sets. And there's sort of a nice evolution in terms of what you're learning and what they're offering. So, if you think that that's a direction you want to go, or if it's just personal communication skills, how to improve that, there's a lot of courses to take. I'd have your HR learning advisor on speed dial and, have that conversation. And as well, your learning plan at your PMA, it's another huge way to suck that knowledge out of your manager and find different ways to achieve what skills you're lacking or you want to reach for.
Great, thank you. Lynn, I think.
Really quick point on that.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
One of the things I would say in terms of gaining experience, small is beautiful. One of the wonderful things about small agencies is that they're often terribly under-resourced. And that's a great advantage if you're looking for more experience. And I can say that from having been in a bunch, because there's not very many people around, you're going to get asked to do way more stuff than you would in a much bigger department. If there's 3 of you to handle the full range of things that need to be handled versus 300 of you, guess what? You're dividing by 3. And one of the things, especially the earlier parts of your career, if you want to get more experience earlier, go smaller. Because you will be asked to do a range of things that you wouldn't. In my department, 7,000 people, whatever number we are, we get a lot of people take care of a lot of things. Never enough, in case finance or treasury board's listening, but we have way more than I had in much smaller places. And that meant I had to ask people to do budgeting, I had to ask people to do supervision, I had to ask people to participate in types of meetings when I was in smaller agencies that people wouldn't get within 100 miles of if they were in a much bigger department.
Great. Debbie, what's the most important skill you would say in order to become deputy?
Number one, you can't plan on being a deputy, and if you're talking to anybody who's planning on it, they need to have a real hard think about it. I think it's being good at all your previous jobs. You are more than anything else. And I tell my executive this all the time. You might think mistakenly that you're here to manage files. You're not. You're here to manage people. You're here to manage people, and you're here to ensure confidence. You're here to ensure confidence of the Canadians whose services we provide and who depend on us. You're here to provide confidence within your organization, in the staff and the management teams, and you're here to provide confidence to the minister and to the prime minister and to the cabinet. And I think the way you do that is you be very good at all of the things that you're asked to do, working with people, thinking through things, remembering to ask the questions that other people aren't being asked. Probably most importantly, to look for what's missing. Who didn't get to speak here? What are the blind spots that we've missed? What are the things that nobody's thought about yet? No point in adding overthinking to a situation where everybody is already thinking about it 50 times over. What have they missed? Because it's the stuff that you miss that invariably comes back to haunt you the most. So there's no secret set of ingredients, but I would say all of the people that I know that have become deputies, that, this is one of the things when you get old, people who are sitting around the deputies table, you knew them when they were directors, you knew them when they were senior analysts, you knew them sort of when they were ADMs, and there was always something about them in terms of the drive, in terms of the way they worked with people, in terms of their focus and dedication to delivering on things. And I'll tell you, and I'll just leave myself, and they all have some remarkable screw-ups in their past and history, myself included. My list of things where I've been spectacularly wrong is longer than the introduction that you gave me, and far more interesting too. So.
All right, back to the drawing board I go. Lynn, la question est à toi. Différents concours utilisent différentes terminologies, des fois qui veut dire la même chose. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait?
Ouais, bonne question. Je vais essayer d'aller assez rapidement, là. C'est tellement captivant, là. Like what the deputy is saying, I'm taking notes also at the same time. It's so much fun. En termes de ta question, je pense que, tu sais, si on veut être, if we want to be real, il y a toujours la possibilité de communiquer. Si il y a quelque chose qu'on ne comprend pas dans la terminologie, soit de l'annonce d'emploi, quelque chose de spécifique où on n'est pas certain en termes de les fonctions du poste, c'est toujours possible de communiquer avec la personne contact que sur l'annonce d'emploi, en espérant que cette personne-là n'est pas débordée puis elle va pouvoir répondre à tes questions. C'est une bonne façon de peut-être avoir un bon sens là, du genre de poste pour lequel que vous postulez. C'est important aussi on l'a mentionné là, dans les autres questions auparavant, de bien comprendre les compétences. Si l'annonce d'emploi décrit pas les définitions de soit les compétences ou l'expérience ou quoi que ce soit qu'il recherche, vous pouvez toujours faire une recherche sur Internet afin de pouvoir avoir une idée d'une définition des compétences que le gestionnaire recherche. Donc, avoir un petit sens de, tu sais, OK, donc ça, c'est mon exemple, ça, c'est l'expérience que j'ai, ça, c'est l'exemple que je vais utiliser afin de définir comment est-ce que je rencontre cette compétence-là, cette expérience-là, ces habiletés-là. Donc, c'est afin de pouvoir voir, de bien comprendre et de trouver les bons exemples dans votre expérience de travail, d'études, de travail de bénévolat, de trouver ces bons exemples-là, puis d'expliquer comment vous répondez aux exigences ou aux compétences.
Super. So basically, because the posters have kind of the different language to say the same thing, so what do we do? And I think kind of the bottom line is, there's contact information on the posters, and it's important that you have the opportunity to contact the HR advisor to try and get as much information as you can to be able to draw upon the experience. C'est bien.
Can I just add something as well? I think if you have a mentor when you are applying for a job, you just ask them to take a look at the application and the poster just to make sure. They probably have more experience and can offer some suggestions, and it might up your chances as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, making sure that, because we spend so much time, right, filling in these applications and drafting the letter and the questions, that it's always worth un petit coup d'œil, and on jette we ask our colleague or someone or a mentor to take a look at it, to make sure that we're along the right lines. Listen, I have an interesting question to ask. So what do we do when the team leader or manager blocks any possibilities of us achieving our career goals? So if I'm asking for training and I don't get it, but then someone else gets it, if I'm asking for supervisory help and I'm not getting it, but someone else gets it, so that someone is saying that it seems to be kind of an issue and question of favoritism. And so I guess, how do we get above and beyond that if we have someone that's blocking us? Who wants to answer that question? Maybe Deputy, that's a good one for you.
There we go. I was going to say Lynn or Kim really wanted to go first on this one. So listen, I think there's a range of answers of this, right? First of all, don't assume in the first instance that they know that you're thinking that they're doing that, and don't assume that they even think that they're doing that. Like, it could be, don't get me wrong, it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it may be that they didn't know. And it might be that you think that you talked to them about it, and it might be that they have forgotten. Like, I deal with probably 250 emails a day, and another sort of dozen or so meetings a day, and X number of crises that can pop up. So every once in a while I forget something. And that was true when I was a senior ADM. It was true when I was an ADM. It was true when I was a DG. It was true when I was a director. So it's not sort of something that came to me recently. So, I think communication on that is the first thing. And I would be direct about it, right? And I put it in writing in my annual training plan. I put it in writing in my response to my performance agreement, and there are different ways of doing it. And, you may find that you need to be very blunt at some point in time because you've tested this out and you're actually getting what is to you the wrong answer. I think the other piece of it too, though, if this were me personally, and I just felt that somebody really wasn't going to help on that front and, either just wouldn't help or maybe be actively blocked, I'd go find something else to do. It is a great, big, massive public service. One of the things about working for the federal government is there's not a single employer in the country that is within 100,000 miles of how big we are and how many opportunities we have. And you get to go with your pension, you get to go with your seniority, and you actually get to bring your experience along with you. And that is a warning to any of you here who are managers and who do hiring, is that people have a lot of options available to them. And so remember that if you're a manager, but you can't abuse this. It's not like every single time you want something that you don't get, you can sort of jump up and down. But I would never shy away from being respectfully clear about it. And if I came to a point where, even for good reasons, something simply wasn't going to be possible in a particular area, and I really wanted to go do something else that brought me on a different path, I'd go.
Excellent. Okay, that's good. Alors, la prochaine question, c'est quand on parle durant une entrevue, plusieurs fois, on demande aux candidats quelles sont les choses sur lesquelles vous aimeriez vous améliorer. What are the three, what are one or two weaknesses or things that you would like to work on? How do we say that in a way that it doesn't feel like I'm admitting failure? And then I'm going to walk out of the room and I'm going to go, oh, I failed. I should have never said that. So what's the diplomatic way of answering that question? Who wants to take that one on?
I could give it a go if you want.
Sure.
I think it's positioning and being strategic. So everyone has weaknesses. They're all aware of it. So you mention the weakness and then you say, I am working on this, this, and this to improve it, or I have a plan to get better at doing this. So it's offering your weakness, which you're aware of, but it's also showing that you're self-aware and that you're taking the steps to improve or get the skill set or.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Anyone else?
Lynn?
Peut-être une chose que je pourrais rajouter, ça serait, you know, it's a little bit like Kim was saying, you maybe pick a competency or pick a skill that you'd like to develop and maybe put that as your priority in either your learning plan or your personal learning plan in the year and work on that. Maybe depending on the feedback you may have received, or like we just mentioned, you didn't qualify in a certain process where you were, you know, fully expecting to qualify in or get. It's just to kind of face that, and the deputy mentioned that earlier too. It's like own that and then work on developing that. And a little bit to go on what we were mentioning earlier too, when we were talking about there's you know, if it's not being developed where you are and you're not getting those opportunities, there's many other opportunities like the deputy mentioned, and there's micro missions. So maybe perhaps put that in your learning plan and say, you know what, I'd like to develop this over the next year, 2 years. And you find those opportunities where you can go on assignment or secondment or even a micro mission to be able to develop those skills. But you need to make those a priority for yourself in order to be able to develop.
Great.
I would say, like, I'm not sure what the best way is, but I'll give you what I think is the worst. And it's when people come and say, well, I think my greatest weakness is that I'm too strong in area X, right? Or I sometimes just have too many qualities in this area. And I've had people actually say that in interviews. I can't count how many times. And what I can also tell you is this absolute. In exactly 0 instances that anyone has ever said that to me, I've ever hired them. Like, it just, you know, and it's like, I would say 20% of the time people say something like that. I think an easy way to do it for me, this might not work for everybody, it's just pick something you screwed up. Pick a concrete example and to say, you know what, I got to the end of this process. It was really important. And it turned out we hadn't consulted with so-and-so at all, or somebody had really misunderstood a core part of this. And I kind of hoped that they were understanding it. I should have read the signals better, and I didn't. And so what I learned from that experience was this. And if somebody's talking to you about that, for me, hiring is entirely a process of risk management, right? Like, I've got 50 people that I'm looking at. I've got things that actually really matter. We don't do many things in government at all that don't matter. So if it fails, I will be in trouble. And so hiring is a process of risk management in which I say, who is the person who's actually going to best help me to get done what I need to do here? And when I hear somebody say, boy, did I screw up, and here's what I learned from that, and it's sincere and it's concrete and it's actually moving in the right direction, it's like, okay, here's someone I'm not going to be spending arguing with for 3 weeks that they messed up in the first place before I can even get to the conversation about how you're going to fix it. Because the most distressing thing as a manager is not convincing somebody who's really messed something up that they really messed something up.
I'm taking notes, Deputy. I'm taking notes.
And I have to say that being prepared with a failure, it is a trend. I've heard a number of interviews that candidates have been asked, talk about a failure that you've had. So that's a great point. Thank you, Daniel.
Good. Lynn, pourquoi est-ce que les processus d'embauche prennent tellement de temps?
Très bonne question. Bon, ben ça, c'est la question du jour. Hein? Ça, c'est la question qu'on reçoit de tout le monde, tout le temps. Mais les processus de sélection, en tout cas, je pense que honnêtement, dans les dernières années, je trouve que c'est beaucoup plus rapide que ça l'a été il y a déjà 20 ans, là, mais moi, je me date. Je trouve que c'est comme je mentionnais tantôt, c'est important de bien définir rencontrer et de bien rencontrer les exigences que le poste demande. Pour le moment, le système de ressources humaines de la fonction publique, c'est celui qu'on a. Donc, c'est un système un petit peu daté. Je crois qu'il va y avoir des changements là-dedans dans les années prochaines, mais pour le moment, c'est le système que nous avons. Puis les ministères sont responsables d'afficher leur propre poste. Donc, les annonces d'emploi sont développées par les ministères qui recherchent à recruter des gens. Donc, c'est important de bien de lire chaque annonce. Je veux dire, vous pouvez voir que l'information se répète souvent, mais des fois, là, c'est vraiment de lire les différentes parties, puis de bien regarder les choses, les critères d'expérience, les critères d'éducation, les atouts s'il y en a. Puis c'est de bien démontrer ces exigences-là dans votre demande d'emploi. Une autre chose que je pourrais peut-être mentionner, je sais qu'on a mentionné tantôt que ça prend beaucoup de temps à appliquer à chaque fois pour chaque poste, mais pour rendre ça un petit peu plus rapide, ce serait vraiment de garder votre compte à jour du système de ressourcement de la fonction publique, de votre compte d'emploi GC. Gardez vos informations personnelles à jour, votre CV à jour. Si vous avez un nouveau poste, des nouvelles habiletés que vous avez. Donc, c'est bien important de garder tout ça à jour, votre lettre de couverture, de bien démontrer aux bonnes places qu'est-ce que vous avez. Donc, je sais, ça prend un petit bout de temps, mais il y a des petits trucs là afin de pouvoir faire ça un petit peu plus vite.
So the processes are slowly but surely getting faster. And I guess departments are responsible for posting the positions that they're looking to fill. And, I guess it has to do with the number of interviews as well, and candidates and boards and screenings and so on. So it is a bit of a lengthy process, but we are looking at things. I got a few questions about, and I think we talked a little bit about it in the beginning in terms of where do we get our skills if we don't have, the management skill or so on. But there's a couple of questions about, I'm a recent graduate and I don't have very much experience. I'm trying to get into the public service. How do I do that? And someone else that says, I was a lifeguard and a lot of retail, and how do I bring in those skills? How do I become a public servant? What do I do? Who wants to take that question?
I can start. Go ahead, Lynn.
Si vous me permettez, I think, if you don't have a lot of experience, and if you're already familiar with what's available on GC Jobs, is every year the PSC or the Public Service Commission advertise their post-secondary recruitment campaigns. So most of the jobs or the career choices that are posted on there, or the inventories, rarely require any experience. They might require some additional experience or some of the assets that you might have, which you'll have an opportunity to demonstrate if you do apply to those. But a lot of the cases, those career choices or those job advertisements under post-secondary recruitment really only expect you to meet the education requirements stated. And so it gives you an opportunity to, perhaps, apply to, to start your career in the public service with your education and maybe perhaps some of the assets that you might have. I think that's what I could offer. Kim?
Well, I think it's transferring your outside experience into government speak, really. Like, did you look after a project? Well, you showed leadership, or you took the lead on a variety of things. Were you asked your opinion? Well, you gave advice. Did you do something wrong? You adapted the plan to meet a need. And then, would you do anything differently? I learned X, Y, and Z. So it's taking a look at even the small things, seeing what you did, what you brought to the table, and putting it in that government speak. I think that might help. But government is a wild place.
And when we talk about government speak, we always talk about the lingo, the language being used in posters, and when we're applying for certain jobs, there's a lot of times where you're told if you don't write that word, you'll get screened out and the system will screen you out. And so there's that language. There is a lot that people have to get through, and that's why it's really important to, if you do have a mentor, you have a colleague, someone in the public service, run your application by them, to make sure that your examples are strong and concrete, and that'll be beneficial to you because you're putting all this time into these processes, right? So you want to get something out of it.
I can just jump in
Yes.
quickly on that last question, especially for people who are outside the public service. What I always advise people wanting to get into government is do exactly that, get in. Listen, if you can get in where you want to get in, if you can get into the position you want to get into, fantastic. But if you've tried that 3 or 4 or 5 times and that isn't working, get in anywhere you can. Because number one, there's a gazillion times more opportunities once you're in the system. That's because we have way more internal competitions than we do that are open to the public. And I would say don't get hung up, especially for your first position, that it isn't your dream job. Don't get hung up on the fact that it isn't the level that you want. If you get into an entry-level job that we sort of regularly recruit from outside on, and you're still there after longer than you think you should be, that's a different story. But you get 5 tickets for the price of 1 if you get into the system in the first place, because you get to apply on all those other things that are in the system that you wouldn't see if you're outside, number 1. But number 2, now the people making the hiring decisions have actually seen you perform. And, we all know the people that we have worked with and sort of have been able to assess them very differently than all the people that are sitting outside behind a computer screen somewhere sending in CVs. And take advantage of those 2 things. And it works too inside a department. Like if you desperately want to get to Global Affairs Canada, for example, well, then, it may be that they don't appoint you ambassador right off the bat, but on the other hand, they may be looking for HR people, or they may be looking for people to be on a call center. It's, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I don't know if any of you, or I'm sure that you're all reading a book. If you were to, do you have a book to recommend on career, on skills, on professional development? Est-ce que vous avez un livre que vous êtes en train de lire ou que vous avez déjà lu dans le passé sur choix de carrière ou développement professionnel? Est-ce qu'il y a un livre que vous pouvez recommander à nos gens? Anyone?
Well, if I were to recommend in terms of people skills 3 to focus on, I don't have any specific, but self-awareness, mindfulness, and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, those are 3 powerful skills for sure. Lynn, what would you say are 3 takeaways for people in terms of the 3 strong skills?
Oh, c'est une bonne question. And I was trying to rack my brain. Yeah, maybe a little bit like what Kim was saying. For me, I'm not sure if I've really read any. I'm sure I've read lots of books in development, but one that mindfulness, what Kim was mentioning, I did a course on that a couple of years ago that came strongly recommended by my director at the time. So that has truly helped me. And on the most, overwhelming days, busy days, stressful days, you just take a minute and try to kind of reset yourself. So I think for me, I have found that very useful. And then in terms of really just like communication and kind of maybe it's not book related, but like building your network, I find it's maybe like running on what we were last discussing is really internally to try to get in, and while you're in is really to just continue building your network and not just kind of finding the people to connect with, but really nurturing those relationships that you've built throughout the years, wherever they are, be it at university or in a work context or in volunteer. I know for me, I rely a lot on my network that I've built over the years, and they have served me well, and they continue serving me well. And those are the people that you can go back to and ask questions and check in on yourself, So I think maybe that's one of the takeaways that I could leave.
Great. Deputy, I have a final question. Maybe perhaps final question or close to final question. If I get qualified or I'm pre-qualified in the pool and I don't get appointed in my current department, in my current team, in my current sector, and I'm not someone who's super out there and I don't have all those networks and I don't know all those people and I don't know, senior officials and I have sometimes my relationship with my boss is not kind of the best. So how do I, comment est-ce que je vends la poutine? How do I sell myself? How do I get myself out there and tell people, hey, I'm in a pool, someone please come and get me?
C'est pour moi cette question?
Si vous voulez répondre.
Ah, OK. Mais je vais répondre d'abord à la question précédente, parce que c'est ce que font les sous-ministres. Peu importe c'est quoi la question, ils répondent comme ils voudront. 5 books, and they're biased by the type of work I do. Number one, the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's one of the oldest known pieces of human literature, and it's worth reading because what it shows more than anything else is human beings haven't changed in 5,000 years. If you can tell the difference between the Epic of Gilgamesh and an episode of the Kardashians, I'd be surprised. Number two, at least this chapter, the second chapter of Marcus Aurelius is the Roman Emperor's Meditations. Chapter 2 is Things for Which I Am Thankful. Person towards the end of his life, one of the great philosophers, Roman Emperor at its exact peak, and listen to what he is thankful for and see how much of it would apply in your life in some version or another. De Montaigne's essays, particularly De l'Expérience, but also De l'Amitié and a bunch of others. I think one of the things that those three show is how human beings have stayed the same in their fears, their hopes, what drives them, what stops them over the millennia. And I think you'll find that it's very similar today. And it's important to remember when people are telling you something's radically different or new, or we're not in the same world. We might be in a different world, but we're the same humans. The next two are about the difference that individuals make. One by the name of John Lukács, who wrote 5 Days in May, London, 1940. If I asked you why was Churchill chosen as British Prime Minister during the Second World War, you would probably repeat the story that because he was best able to rally the British people against Germany. It's not why he was selected. He was selected because he would surrender, except he refused to play ball. And it's the story about how one individual in the space of 5 days convinced a country and a system that had given up that it shouldn't do so, and it has had probably 1,000 years impact on history, one individual. The last one is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, which is a long book. The previous one's only 200 pages long, so it's a quick read. This one is about 750. But what it's worth reading for is how hard Abraham Lincoln worked to take his most profound skeptics and actually bring them on board his team. It is a remarkable human history moment and critical to anybody, I think, in understanding how you can actually change the course of events, particularly those last two books. And then sort of the last one, if you're not out there, it's much simpler than that list. Go visit people, talk to people, visit them, learn who they are, have as many meetings as you need to have, and that they'll have different people will have with you, and just be out there.
That's a great response. And that's lots to read. I am going to need that list of books because I couldn't write fast enough. On the question about networking, I think, everyone could do themselves a favor if every day they give themselves a personal goal to meet one or two new people and develop kind of a relationship and get to know that person. And from there, things will snowball. Mais c'est entièrement votre carrière vous appartient comme ma carrière m'appartient. Et j'ai beaucoup aimé ce que le sous-ministre a dit. On planifie pour notre job du futur. On compétitionne pour aujourd'hui, but we plan for that job that two jobs down the road. And that's something I think that I'm going to keep in mind. Merci à tous les panélistes. Ça a été une discussion super enrichissante. I wish we could keep going because there are a lot more questions. I have a lot more questions, and this is such a great panel of interesting members. So we will end on that, and I'd like to invite everyone to a networking opportunity that you would have received through the invite from the Canada School. So you can just click on the Expo link and you'll find the networking area there. And don't forget that boot camp continues into tomorrow and February 1st and 3rd. Alors, merci encore à tout le monde. Merci aux panélistes et je vous souhaite une très belle journée. Bonne chance dans votre carrière. Merci.